I found myself transported into a novel, becoming the male lead of a CEO romance. I was the type of brainless CEO protagonist who, despite owning a trillion-dollar conglomerate and being worth over 100 billion, was still a workaholic who'd stressed himself into a stomach ulcer. Even though work was overwhelming, I somehow still had time for a forced romance with a naive female lead. When I first read this book, I nearly coughed up blood from anger. The nonsensical plot was infuriating. As the actual CEO of a publicly traded Fortune 500 company and the richest man in the country, I know better than anyone that managing a corporation leaves you no time to even eat, let alone pursue a romance. Who would have thought I'd wake up inside that very CEO novel I had just finished? At this exact moment, I was in the middle of interviewing candidates for an executive assistant position. Looking at the resume of a woman named Miriam Vance, I couldn't help but feel my mouth twitch. Miriam Vance, the naive, damsel in distress protagonist of this book, the CEO's runaway bride, escape number 99. She came from an ordinary background, had an associate's degree in fashion design, yet somehow managed to become my secretary. She'd clumsily spill water on me while serving drinks, trip and fall directly into my arms, and turn my files into a complete disaster. She even managed to cause the company to lose a billion-dollar contract because of a single typo. At the time, I fired her without a moment's hesitation, my head pounding with rage. She actually had the audacity to cry and ask me what she did wrong. I almost laughed out of sheer disbelief. I hadn't even made her compensate the company for the billion-dollar loss, and she still had the nerve to question me. I had just fired her a week ago. Now, I needed a highly educated and genuinely capable executive assistant. Miriam Vance had disguised herself by painting freckles on her face, putting on a pair of thick, black-framed glasses, and letting heavy bangs cover half her face before coming back to interview again. I was speechless. Did she really think I wouldn't recognize her like this? If you're going to go through the trouble of a disguise, at least change your name. I glanced at her resume for a few seconds. It clearly didn't meet my criteria. I immediately told her to leave and called for the next candidate to come in. But she just stood there, frozen, stubbornly looking up at me. You're telling me to leave before I even introduce myself? Is your company always this unreasonable? Her face was a mask of indignation. I remained expressionless and said, I'm looking for a highly educated professional. The minimum requirement is a bachelor's degree in finance or management. You studied fashion design. Do you really think you're qualified? Miriam's entire face flushed red with anger, and her tone grew sharp. How do you know I can't do it if you don't even give me a chance? So what if I only have an associate's degree? Does that give a big company the right to look down on people? I almost laughed out loud in anger. I pointed to a line on her resume. Miss Vance, the executive assistant I'm hiring must be fluent in at least 4 languages. You haven't even passed a basic English proficiency test. How dare you apply? It's ridiculous. After becoming the CEO protagonist, I was completely focused on my career. I had zero interest in some cliche romance with a naive female lead. Money and my business were my true passions. Women were just a distraction. Moreover, in this illogical novel world, I absolutely could not allow anyone to ruin the hundreds of companies now under my control. I didn't know if I'd ever return to my own reality, but it didn't really matter. This was just another place to build an empire. There was no real difference. Miriam's face was flushed with embarrassment for my retort. She was speechless for a moment, but still refused to back down. You're just discriminating against my education. I'm a patriot. Why would I ever learn the languages of other countries? A headache was starting to form. I waved to the security guards nearby. Get her out of here. Get her out now. I was afraid if they didn't take her away, I was going to lose my temper. Trying to reason with a capitalist like me was completely pointless. If she couldn't create sustainable value, what was the point of hiring her? So she could continue to cause problems for me? No thanks. She could go bother the male antagonist instead. Miriam was escorted out by security, cursing the entire way. Once I could no longer hear her, my ears were finally blessed with quiet. The subsequent interviewees were all perfectly normal. They all had master's degrees or higher, relevant specializations, proficiency in multiple languages, and prior work experience. They were very impressive. I hired 2 assistants, 1 man and 1 woman, both highly capable, and offered them positions on the spot. I then proceeded to paint them a grand vision of their future with the company. I told them that as long as they worked hard, promotions and raises would be easily attainable. In reality, after hiring them, I was already strategizing how to maximize their potential. Their salaries would not be handed out for nothing. I wasn't like the protagonist in the original story who casually offered multi-million-dollar salaries. What a joke. With a salary that high, I'd be willing to work for the guy myself. Too bad I was the guy now. I sat in the CEO's chair, rubbing my aching head as I flipped through some documents. My secretary walked in with a cup of coffee. coffee. Mr. Drake, your coffee. I glanced up at the black coffee and said, change it. Give me some herbal tea with a few goji berries and use my thermos. The female secretary just stood there holding the thermos, looking completely bewildered as if she'd misheard me. I gave her an unyielding look and she finally snapped out of her daze and went to make the tea. Soon, she returned with my herbal tea, which I sipped with a look of pure enjoyment. I then noticed her professional attire and offered a piece of advice. It's getting cold. Remember to wear some thermal underwear. Young women need to stay warm. Don't sacrifice your health for fashion. The secretary looked as if she'd been struck by lightning. She nodded mechanically and left my office. A moment later, there was a loud bang, the sound of something being knocked over. I instinctively glanced in that direction. The cleaning lady had knocked over a water bucket and was frantically trying to clean up the mess. I just turned away when my head snapped back. Once I got a clear look at her face, I spat out a mouthful of tea in shock. You, Miriam Vance, what are you doing here? This woman was truly inescapable. She had even infiltrated my company as a cleaner. She was going to be the death of me. How did HR even hire someone who couldn't handle a simple cleaning task without making a mess? Miriam raised her face to look at me, flushed with a mixture of shame and anger. I'm sorry, sir. You have the wrong person. My name isn't Miriam. There was no way I could be mistaken. Did she really think I wouldn't recognize her just because she deliberately dressed herself to look plain? How blind did she think I was? I immediately called HR and had her fired. This menace absolutely could not remain in my company. I gave a strict order that none of the companies under my corporate group were to hire anyone named Miriam Vance, and I had her name blacklisted. Sir, this is bad. My newly hired assistant suddenly rushed in, panicked. Our company is being slandered online. There are posts all over Twitter claiming our products have quality issues. I rubbed my sore neck and took the phone he handed me. One glance was all it took to see this was a clumsy attempt at corporate warfare, likely orchestrated by my nemesis, Howard Miller. I calmly scanned the posts. What's there to panic about? So, that very day, I paid off the cleaning lady at the rival company and had her unplug Howard's internet cable for several days in a row. I also paid a few influencers to spread rumors online that Howard's products had similar quality issues. Soon, Howard's company was mired in scandal and trending on Twitter. Because their internet was down for a full day, their internal operations were thrown into chaos, and they lost several major contracts. I was amused. Things were peaceful for a while after that. I became much more vigilant on my way to work, constantly scanning my surroundings. Not seeing that Menace Miriam anywhere was a relief. As a workaholic, I was nearly suffocating under the workload, completely overwhelmed with tasks. While traveling to Chicago for a business negotiation, I foolishly let my guard down. I ran into her even there. I had just checked into the presidential suite at a hotel when I saw a familiar figure. My thermos of herbal tea nearly slipped from my hand as I stared in horror at the protagonist, now wearing a hotel housekeeping uniform. Miriam Vance, what are you doing here? This woman was like a vengeful ghost, wasn't she? She had followed me all the way here. I thought she didn't speak English. How did she get a job at a hotel in Chicago? Miriam wore a mask and looked at me calmly, her bangs covering her eyes. Hello, sir. I know not what you say. Potato, how many bags you dig? Rice bags you carry? My mouth twitched uncontrollably. Did she think I wouldn't recognize her just because she was speaking some garbled, nonsensical English? I wasn't blind. Since she refused to admit it, I couldn't be bothered to argue. I called the hotel's front desk and had them remove this housekeeper. I had just checked in, but didn't need my room cleaned. Her showing up at that precise moment made her intentions perfectly clear, and I wasn't going to fall for it. After Miriam, that persistent ghost, was called away, the presidential suite was finally peaceful. Even the air felt fresher. The next day, I met with my business partners and successfully signed the contract. I then had my secretary book my flight home. At the company's anniversary celebration, I saw the protagonist, Miriam Vance, on stage in a dance costume. I nearly lost my mind. I called over my secretary, my hand shaking as I pointed at the stage. Why is she here? The female secretary calmly pushed up her glasses and glanced at the stage. Well, sir, one of the hired dancers sprained her ankle right before the performance and couldn't go on. This was a last-minute replacement. I took a deep breath, clutching my chest as if I were about to have a heart attack. And you think she's a good dancer? My secretary was silent for a moment. She's passable. You call that passable? I shot up from my seat, angrily pointing at Miriam, who was dancing on stage with all the grace of a flailing octopus. You call that contorted mess, which is worse than a clown's act, passable? Is my company so poor that we can't afford professional dancers? Did you just grab a random person off the street? Realizing her mistake for my outburst, my secretary immediately scrambled to fix the situation. She called someone to escort Miriam off the stage. As my personal assistant, she certainly shouldn't have been so careless. The other executives sitting near me, hearing my anger, didn't dare to even breathe. The celebration was followed by a banquet. To prevent Miriam from appearing like a ghost again, I hired 5 bodyguards. The tea and wine are safe. No poison. The snacks and food are safe. No poison. The fruit is safe. No poison. The 5 bodyguards diligently inspected every single item I consumed with the utmost seriousness. They were ensuring there would be no repeat of that classic CEO novel scene where the male lead gets drugged and the female lead swoops in to save him. I looked at the bodyguards with satisfaction. Very professional. The money was well spent. However, the people around me started giving me strange looks. I couldn't hear what they were whispering, but from their expressions, you'd think they were looking at someone with a serious mental illness. I didn't care. As a CEO protagonist, if I wasn't careful, I'd end up with the female lead getting pregnant and running away, leading to a messy, dramatic chase to win her back. What a joke. I'm a capitalist, not some romance-obsessed fool. How else could I manage so many companies? But despite all my precautions, I still fell into a trap. Feeling my body grow hot and my limbs go weak, I knew something was wrong. I immediately called for my bodyguards to take me to the hospital. But before we could leave, my bodyguards were called away for various reasons. I was helped into a nearby lounge instead. Hearing the sound of the door being unlocked, my heart sank and my scalp tingled. Damn it couldn't be that persistent ghost, Miriam Vance, could it? The room was dark, and I couldn't see the person who entered. They fumbled their way inside in the darkness. "Who's there?" I called out warily, cursing under my breath. This damn plot. There was no way I was falling for this. The person didn't answer, but moved closer, following the sound of my voice. I recoiled from their approach, and the pungent, cheap perfume made me sneeze several times. "Miriam Vance, you really are a persistent ghost," I said through gritted teeth. I was certain it was her. "Alexa," I called out into the air. A synthesized voice responded. "I'm here." After getting the response, I commanded, "Turn on the lights." With a soft click, the lights flooded the room, making it as bright as day. I could now clearly see the person who had entered. It was, as I suspected, Miriam Vance. She stood frozen, blinded by the sudden brightness, clearly caught off guard. I felt a surge of smug satisfaction. This hotel was one of my company's properties, and every room, from a standard double to the presidential suite, was equipped with a smart voice assistant. I looked at Miriam coldly. Get out. Despite all my precautions, I'd still been drugged from a single sip of wine. This plot was so determined to serve the female lead, forcing the story forward in every conceivable way to make me have a one-night stand with her. This kind of plot was utterly disgusting. What are you talking about? Miriam's eyes were red as she stood there helplessly, looking like a frightened little rabbit. I didn't come in here on my own. You're the one who pulled me in. I was speechless. Are you an idiot? I'm sitting right here. How could I have possibly pulled you in? You drugged me. That's a crime. Miriam choked back a sob. I didn't. It wasn't me. Don't come near me, she cried, even as she walked closer to me, looking utterly wronged and terrified, as if I had done something unforgivable to her. I'd rolled my eyes so many times I was starting to lose count. Seeing the protagonist approach, I kicked her away. Get lost, she screamed, tears streaming down her face, but she quickly got back up and lunged at me again. Damn it, I cursed, kicking her away once more. The female lead was like an unkillable cockroach. After about a dozen rounds of this, I was getting tired. I immediately shouted, "Alexa, call 911. I bet she didn't expect that. The smart assistant couldn't only turn on the lights, TV, and fans, but it could also make emergency calls. I was nothing if not prepared. When I was helped into the lounge earlier, I had noticed my phone was missing. The police arrived quickly. I immediately called for help. It's this woman. She drugged me. Help me. The ambulance arrived soon after, and I was taken to the hospital. Miriam was taken away in a police car, silently crying the entire time, looking helpless and bewildered, as if she had no idea what was going on. The police checked the security footage, but found no evidence of Miriam drugging me, so it was unclear where the drug came from. However, her suspicious entry into my room was highly questionable. I later learned that Miriam was released on bail after the initial investigation found insufficient evidence to hold her. The next day, I woke up in the hospital. I've been on 4-drip all night to counteract the drug. "Mr. Drake," my assistant began, "I've reviewed all the security footage, and there's no sign of when Miriam could have possibly drugged you. We had the wine you were drinking tested, and it did contain a potent substance that causes a spike in hormones and libido," my assistant reported coldly, flipping through the investigation results. My face darkened. "So you found nothing? And what about the bodyguards I hired? They had been suddenly called away for various reasons right before the incident, and I still hadn't seen them. They ran off, my assistant said. File a complaint with the security company. Yes, sir. I was discharged from the hospital. As a ruthless capitalist, I couldn't let a minor health issue keep me from my work. I had barely gotten back to the office when I received a call from my mother, the original protagonist's mother. Did you really get involved with some low-class woman and end up in a hospital because of her? An aristocratic, displeased voice crackled through the phone. I rubbed my temples and explained, "No, that's a misunderstanding. Let me warn you," she continued, "not just any stray cat or dog can enter the Drake family. A woman from the wrong background can't help your career and has no right to be a part of our family. Don't forget, you have a fiancé." With that, she hung up before I could say another word. I was completely bewildered. I checked Twitter and immediately saw a trending headline. Hashtag Drake Group hospitalized over woman, followed by an exploding head emoji. I clicked on it, and my expression instantly became one of utter disbelief. What on earth was this garbage? Are reporters writing this kind of exaggerated nonsense now? Was this supposed to be news or some trashy romance novel? They had even written taglines like, "She runs, he chases, she can never escape." I was speechless. I immediately called my secretary and had her deal with the trending topics online. That afternoon, I received a phone call. Before I could speak, a familiar, humiliated voice came through the line. "Don't think you can just buy me with your money. I will never sell my noble soul. I will not submit to your money." "Miriam?" I asked, shocked. "How did you get my number?" But she had already hung up after her declaration, clearly not having heard me. I stared at the ceiling in complete bewilderment. What was that all about? It wasn't until the next day, when my mother came to my office, that I finally understood the meaning of Miriam's call. "I gave that woman a sum of money," my mother said, sitting across from me. "I told her to be sensible, to stay away from you, and to leave this city forever." Mrs. Drake sat across from me, her expression unreadable. She was impeccably dressed in an elegant dress, exuding an aristocratic aura. I paused, then asked anxiously, "You gave her money?" "That woman does have some backbone. I'll give her that," Mrs. Drake replied. "I offered her $1 million to leave you, and she actually tore up the check and walked out." That part seemed to genuinely surprise my mother. I quickly sighed in relief. Good. I'm glad she didn't take it. My mother frowned at my reaction. "Don't tell me you've actually fallen for this woman. I've warned you. Playing around is fine, but don't get serious." "Mom, you've misunderstood," I explained hurriedly. "She's the one who won't leave me alone. I have no interest in her whatsoever. She just keeps pestering me." "Really?" my mother asked, hesitating. I nodded and explained several more times that I had absolutely no relationship with Miriam Vance. As a capitalist, I don't just give money away. I invest it strategically. I also urged her repeatedly not to believe rumors or to start throwing checks at people. Our family's money doesn't grow on trees. My mother's cold, composed expression cracked for a moment, and she looked completely bewildered as my secretary escorted her out. That evening, I attended a business gala where I ran into my nemesis, Howard Miller. He had a woman on his arm as he walked towards me, a malicious smile on his face. "Mr. Drake," he sneered, "I hear you and this woman are quite close." I held my drink and glanced at the woman in his arms. It was Miriam Vance, who looked pained and reluctant. Her eyes lit up when she saw me. My expression remained unchanged as I looked back at him. "Mr. Miller, you're mistaken. I don't know her. Please don't spread false rumors." Inwardly, I was overjoyed. The protagonist had finally gone to bother the antagonist. Howard looked at me hesitantly, then right in front of me, he kissed Miriam. Seeing that I genuinely had no reaction, he shoved Miriam aside and walked closer to me, his teeth gritted. "Edward Drake, you think you've won? You think hiring hackers to attack my company means you've won? I will not lose to you." He left me with those words and stormed away, his face dark. I was completely bewildered. I really didn't have the heart to tell him that I would never waste money on something illegal like hiring hackers. That's against the law. Why would I ever do that? He would never guess that I had simply paid off his cleaning lady to unplug his company's internet cables. After Howard left, Miriam bit her lip and looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. "How could you?" I looked at her, bewildered, and said nothing. "How could you treat me like this? You've disappointed me so much. I can never like you again." She ran away crying. I just stood there exasperated. Well, looks like someone is about to lose their little bunny," a cool, mature female voice said from in front of me. I looked up, and my eyes immediately lit up. It was the beautiful female rival, the arrogant, highborn, and wealthy Evelyn Thorne. She also happened to be the one who had a childhood betrothal agreement with the male lead. At this moment, she was my fiancée. She was wearing a stunning red evening gown, her wavy hair cascading down her shoulders. She walked towards me in red high heels, an air of haughtiness about her. I raised my glass to her. "Miss Thorne, shall we discuss a partnership?" Evelyn looked utterly shocked, clearly not expecting me to approach her about business. I smiled. Isn't a business gala the perfect place to discuss partnerships? I saw a flash of understanding in her eyes. After a moment, she smiled too and raised her glass glass in return. Well then, Mr. Drake, to a successful partnership. We reached a very satisfactory agreement. After partnering with the Thorn Group on a project, I was so busy I barely had time to eat or sleep, practically living at the office. I also wasn't bothered by Miriam Vance anymore. One day, I received a call from an unknown number. I glanced at the unrecognized number and immediately hung up. It rang again moments later. I hung up again. After the 10th time, I got annoyed and blocked the number. Then I turned off my cell phone. A moment later, the landline in my office started ringing. Damn it. I saw the call wasn't from my secretary's extension, so I picked it up and immediately let loose. I'm not buying a house. I'm not buying insurance, and I don't need a loan. If you call again, I will come to your office, steal your briefcase, ride away on your bicycle, and assassinate both you and your dreams in your sleep. The other end was silent for a second before I slammed the phone down. Soon after, the phone rang again. I was beyond irritated. Will you ever give up? I already told you. I'm not buying a house, and I don't need a surrogate. The voice on the other end cut me off. Edward Drake, I have your woman. If you want to save her, transfer half of your company's shares to my name unconditionally, and I'll let her go. I listened to the deliberately lowered voice on the other end. Howard Miller. The person was silent for 2 seconds. You have a wrong person. I'm not him. I snorted. Kidnapping is illegal. This is extortion. And let me clarify, I'm currently single. I don't have a girlfriend. Oh wait, that's not quite right. I do have a fiancé from a childhood arrangement. I hung up without hesitation and called the police. According to the original book's plot, this scene was supposed to happen. Howard Miller kidnaps the female lead, Miriam Vance, but it was supposed to happen much later in the story. I didn't expect it to be moved up. That night, Howard Miller was all over the news for kidnapping. Miriam Vance was rescued. Miller's company was also exposed for multiple instances of tax evasion and went bankrupt overnight. Howard Miller was found guilty of kidnapping, and with the added charge of several $billion in tax evasion, he was sentenced to over 5 years in prison. With my rival's company out of the picture, my company became the largest in the industry. Of course, my company had excellent benefits, always paid its taxes on time, and had absolutely none of the problems his did. There was also no forced overtime. All overtime was completely voluntary. After all, in a company like mine, employees who voluntarily stayed past 6 p.m. to work until 10 p.m. received a free late-night meal. For those who stayed until 11 p.m., the company also reimbursed their transportation costs. Meanwhile, my company flourished. As Evelyn and I continued to work together, we somehow started to see eye to eye on more than just business. We figured we might as well make it official and proceeded with our arranged business marriage. My mother was extremely pleased with this daughter-in-law and even started looking at me more favorably. Seeing us together, she immediately started urging us to get married and have children. Evelyn and I exchanged a helpless glance and told her we would date for a while first, wait for our feelings to deepen, and then get engaged and married. We would take it one step at a time. Evelyn and I got along wonderfully. We both had our own strong opinions on business, and our personal relationship was smooth. We got engaged soon after. My mother was grinning from ear to ear, and even my usually stoic father cracked a rare smile, constantly referring to Evelyn's parents as his new in-laws. The engagement party went very smoothly, except for a small incident in the middle of it. Just as Evelyn and I were exchanging engagement rings, a loud shout came from outside. I object. The room erupted in gasps, then fell so silent you could hear a pin drop. The party had just started, and my eyelids had been twitching nonstop, giving me a bad feeling. When I saw the protagonist appear like a ghost, my expression darkened. Evelyn gave me an ambiguous smile. Your sweetheart. I wore a look of utter despair. I've been framed. I have nothing to do with her. She's the one who keeps haunting me like a ghost. I don't know if Evelyn believed me, but her smile was certainly meaningful. I coldly glared at Miriam, who had just barged in and called for security to drag her out. But somehow, Miriam found the strength to break free and rush onto the stage, stopping right in front of me. She looked at me with an expression of utter grief and disbelief, crying out, "How could you do this to me? How could you abandon me and get engaged to another woman? I'm the one who's supposed to be by your side. She's just a vicious rival who used threats and bribes to get you. You're supposed to love me most of all. We're even supposed to have 2 children." Miriam was rambling incoherently like a madwoman. The entire room was silent. My parents' faces were grim, and Evelyn's parents looked even worse. I was furious. "Miriam, are you insane? If you have some kind of delusional disorder, go get it treated at a psychiatric hospital." At this point, wasn't she completely unhinged? She seemed to know a lot about the original plot. If I hadn't been transported here, the story would indeed have developed just as she said. But I was the male lead now, and there was no way I was going to follow that idiotic plot. Drag her out of here, and while you're at it, take her to a psychiatric hospital. Miriam was quickly dragged away, and no one paid any mind to her hysterical rambling. I explained to everyone present that Miriam suffered from a severe delusional disorder and that I had absolutely no relationship with her. I explained everything to Evelyn Evelyn as well, my gaze sincere as I was not lying in the slightest. As for whether she believed me, she was free to investigate for herself. After the engagement party ended, I took Evelyn's hand and asked her, "Do you believe me?" Evelyn looked at me, the corner of her mouth curling into a slight smile. "We'll see how you behave, my dear fiancé." I raised my glass to her in return. To prove my innocence and prevent my future wife from ever doubting or distrusting me, I personally gathered all the evidence of how Miriam had been haunting me like a ghost. After reviewing the evidence, Evelyn laughed. Even a private investigator wouldn't be this thorough, would they? In truth, Evelyn was quite surprised. She had assumed that before our business marriage, I was like any other man in my position, with countless women flocking around me. But I wasn't. It really had been Miriam persistently harassing me. Even during the drugging incident, I had called the police directly. Evelyn paused when she read that part. "She even drugged you?" "Indeed," I said. "If I hadn't been so clever, I would have fallen right into her trap." Evelyn put down the documents, a smile playing in her eyes as she looked at me. "A beautiful woman threw herself at you, and you remained completely unmoved?" I pulled her onto my lap, my gaze darkening and my voice lowering to a murmur. "It's not that I can stomach just anything. I was afraid of getting a stomachache. But you, my future wife, I absolutely cannot remain unmoved." Before Evelyn could speak, I silenced her with a kiss. We were engaged, after all. As a future husband and wife, a little indulgence was perfectly understandable. Besides, Evelyn was the wife I had chosen for myself. Evelyn and I soon walked down the aisle and began our blissful married life. Before being transported into this book, I had sneered at the very idea of love. Now, I was eating my own words. With my beautiful wife in my arms, how could I possibly remain unmoved? After that day, the female lead never appeared in my life again. Evelyn and I built our own family. Of course, we were still workaholics and were often in different cities for our jobs. But every time we reunited, it was like we were newlyweds again. Absence truly does make the heart grow fonder. We were inseparable, and our relationship was wonderful. We had a son and a daughter. Their arrival was an accident. We hadn't planned on having children so soon after getting married, but who knew my mother would poke holes in all the condoms in our house? When Evelyn got pregnant, I was both speechless and deeply concerned for her well-being. To take care of Evelyn during her pregnancy, I reduced my workload and specifically studied everything about pregnancy, prenatal preparation, and postnatal care. My mother was grinning from ear to ear at the prospect of having grandchildren. Later, as she held our two mischievous little ones, her smile became a bit more forced. And when Evelyn and I accidentally conceived our third child, my mother's expression changed completely. I was even more puzzled by her reaction. That is, until I caught our two little rascals poking holes in the condoms with needles. I was so angry my teeth ached, and I spanked them right then and there. When Evelyn found out, she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The two little troublemakers said they both wanted younger siblings. Later, the third pregnancy turned out to be twins. When my mother took care of the children, she looked very happy. But when I wasn't around, her face would fall and she'd hire 4 or 5 nannies. Then her smile would return. As the weather turned cold, I reminded Evelyn to always wear her thermal underwear and to drink less coffee and more herbal tea. She got annoyed by my constant nagging, but unconsciously, she eventually broke her bad habit of drinking too much coffee. We spent a lifetime together, growing old hand in hand. After we retired and finally handed over the company to our son, I took Evelyn on a tour around the world.